The morning alarm shattered Maya Johnson's dreams at 4:45 a.m., the same as it had for the past 3 years. She silenced it quickly, careful not to wake her son Eli, who slept peacefully in the small bedroom they shared in their one-bedroom apartment. The early September rain tapped against the window as Maya slipped out of bed, her body still heavy with exhaustion from yesterday's double shift. The tiny kitchen welcomed her with familiar creaks in the floorboards as she started. The coffee maker, a luxury she allowed herself, despite tight finances. The appliance hummed to life, filling the small space with its comforting aroma. Maya moved quietly, preparing Eli's lunch for school, a peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, and the last pudding cup from the pack she'd bought on sale last week. Maya glanced at the calendar hanging on the refrigerator door, held by fruit-shaped magnets Eli had picked out last year. 3 red circles marked the dates for this month's rent, electric bill, and Eli's school trip to the Science Museum. Her eyes lingered on the museum date. She'd been saving those extra dollars from her tips jar for weeks now. Eli loved space and dinosaurs, and the thought of his excited face made the extra hours on her feet worthwhile. The shower's lukewarm water washed over her dark skin as Maya mentally organized her day. Drop Eli at Mrs. Wu's apartment by 6:15, catch the 6:30 bus to Rosie's diner for her morning shift, work until 2, rush to her afternoon accounting class at the community college, then back to Rosie's for the evening shift. If the buses ran on time, she might catch Eli before bedtime, but more likely Mrs. Wu would already have tucked him in. "You don't have to do this forever," Maya whispered to her reflection as she pinned her name tag to her pale blue uniform. The words had become a daily affirmation, a promise to herself and Eli. 3 semesters left until her business degree, and then maybe, just maybe, she could start planning for that small cafe she'd dreamed about since high school. Eli stirred as Maya gently woke him. His sleepy brown eyes blinked open, and he smiled at the sight of his mother already dressed in her waitress uniform. "Morning, sunshine," Maya said, smoothing his curly hair. "Ready for school today?" Eli nodded, stretching his small arms above his head. "Is today double shift day?" he asked, the smile fading slightly. Maya's heart tightened, but she kept her voice light. "Yeah, baby. Mrs. Wu will pick you up from after-school program, and I'll try to come kiss you goodnight." Eli nodded again, more solemnly this time. At 7 years old, he already understood more about adult responsibilities than Maya wished. She helped him dress, marveling at how quickly he was growing. The pants she'd bought just 3 months ago were already showing his ankles. The morning routine unfolded with practiced efficiency. Breakfast at their small kitchen table, teeth-brushing contests Eli always won, backpack check, and finally coats on against the persistent rain. They left the apartment together, Maya locking the door behind them while balancing an umbrella to shield them both. Mrs. Wu, a retired teacher who lived on the first floor, greeted them with the smell of fresh cinnamon oatmeal and a warm smile. Her apartment was filled with books and colorful artwork from generations of children she'd cared for. "You look tired, Maya," Mrs. Wu said in her gentle, accented English as Eli headed straight for the bookshelf. "Late night studying again?" Maya nodded, setting down Eli's backpack. "Accounting exam next week. Thanks again for watching him late today." Mrs. Wu waved away her thanks. "This boy is good company. We will read his dinosaur books and I teach him more Chinese characters." She pressed a paper bag into Maya's hands. "Dumplings. Eat something besides coffee today." The kindness brought unexpected tears to Maya's eyes, which she quickly blinked away. "I don't know what we'd do without you," she said honestly. "Everyone needs village," Mrs. Wu replied simply. "Now go, or you miss your bus." The rain had intensified as Maya hurried to the bus stop, the umbrella offering minimal protection against the driving wind. The early morning commuters, mostly service workers, healthcare aides, and janitors, huddled under the small shelter, faces tired but determined. Maya recognized a few regulars and exchanged nods of solidarity. The number 47 bus arrived 7 minutes late, its wipers working furiously against the downpour. Maya squeezed inside, finding a spot to stand near the back. As the bus lurched forward, she held the overhead rail and closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself 5 seconds of stillness before the day truly began. Rosie's diner came into view after a 20-minute ride. The neon sign flickered against the gray morning, promising home cooking 24/7 to anyone seeking comfort food at all hours. Maya had started as the overnight waitress 3 years ago when Eli was 4, taking the only shift that would accommodate her single-parent schedule. Now, as one of the most reliable employees, she had first choice of shifts, which meant she could take both the morning and evening rushes, the highest tipping times. "There she is," called Frank, the short-order cook who'd been at Rosie's longer than anyone could remember. His white hair peeked out from under his chef's hat as he flipped pancakes on the large grill. "Thought the rain might have washed you away, Maya. Takes more than a little water to stop me," she replied with a smile, hanging up her wet coat and stashing her bag in the small employee locker. The morning crowd at Rosie's was a mix of regulars, construction workers fueling up before heading to job sites, office workers grabbing coffee before the 8 a.m. rush, and retirees who came for the company as much as the food. Maya moved between tables with practiced ease, remembering everyone's preferences. Tom with his black coffee and rye toast, no butter. Darlene and her egg white omelet with extra spinach. Old Pete and his pancakes with syrup on the side. "How's that little man of yours?" asked Darlene, a postal worker who always left an extra $1 specifically for Eli. "Growing too fast," Maya answered, refilling her coffee. "Reading everything he can get his hands on. His teacher says he's reading at a 5th grade level already. Smart like his mama." Darlene nodded approvingly. "You still taking those college classes?" 3 more semesters, Maya confirmed, pride slipping into her voice despite her exhaustion. "Business administration with a focus on small business management." "You'll have your own place someday," Darlene predicted, "and I'll be first in line." The morning rush blended into the lunch crowd and Maya's feet began to protest around hour 6. She ignored the discomfort, focusing instead on the tips accumulating in her apron pocket. Tuesday's physics lesson required a new textbook, and Eli had outgrown his winter coat from last year. Each dollar meant something specific in Maya's mental accounting. Maya's phone vibrated during a rare quiet moment. A text from Mrs. Wu. "Eli forgot permission slip for museum. Need signature by tomorrow." Attached was a photo of the form. Maya sighed, knowing she wouldn't be home in time to sign it in person. "Hey, can I borrow a pen and paper?" she asked Louisa, the other waitress on shift. "Need to write a note for Eli's teacher." Between serving tables, Maya wrote a quick note explaining that she authorized the field trip and would bring the signed form tomorrow, adding her signature and phone number in case verification was needed. This wasn't the first time such accommodations had been necessary, and Maya was grateful for the understanding school staff who recognized the challenges of working parents. By the time her morning shift ended at 2 p.m., the rain had stopped, leaving behind puddles that reflected the emerging sun. Maya rushed to the bus stop, calculating the minutes until her accounting class. If the bus was on time, she'd have exactly 7 minutes to reach the classroom on the community college campus. The community college building was a stark contrast to Rosie's, all fluorescent lights and hard, plastic chairs instead of the diner's worn comfort. Maya slid into her seat just as Professor Hayes began his lecture on tax implications for small businesses. Despite her fatigue, Maya took meticulous notes highlighting key concepts that might apply to her future cafe. "Johnson," Professor Hayes called as students packed up after class. "Your midterm analysis was excellent. Have you considered applying for the business incubator program next year?" Maya paused, surprised by the question. "I don't think I can manage the time commitment right now, Professor." "Think about it," he encouraged. "Your cafe concept has potential. There are stipends available for promising projects." The word stipend caught her attention, and Maya promised to look into the application. As she hurried back to catch the bus to Rosie's for her evening shift, a tiny seed of possibility took root alongside her usual practical concerns. The evening shift at Rosie's brought a different crowd. Families seeking affordable meals, couples on budget dates, and solo diners wanting conversation with their comfort food. Maya moved between tables, her smile never revealing the growing ache in her back or the mental calculations of how many more hours until she could rest. Between serving meatloaf specials and bottomless coffee refills, Maya allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, what her own place might look like. Nothing fancy, just a small cafe with homemade pastries, good coffee, and maybe some of her grandmother's soul food recipes on weekends. A place where people like her, working hard, dreaming bigger, could afford to sit and breathe for a moment. A place Eli could be proud of. The thought carried her through the final hours of her shift, past the point where her legs threatened to buckle, until the last customer had paid and left. As Maya wiped down the final table, she had no way of knowing that tomorrow's rain would bring much more than wet shoes and delayed buses. She couldn't have imagined that the wallet she would find, belonging to a man whose name she didn't recognize, would change everything. The evening shift at Rosie's Diner had stretched longer than usual. Outside, what had started as a gentle autumn rain had transformed into a fierce downpour, keeping customers lingering over endless coffee refills rather than venturing into the storm. By 9 o'clock, thunder crashed overhead, and water streamed down the large windows, turning the world beyond into a blurry, darkened haze. Maya's feet throbbed as she moved between tables, her mind drifting to Eli. He would be asleep by now in Mrs. Wu's apartment, probably curled up with his favorite dinosaur book beside him. The image gave her a moment of warmth amid the ache of missing another bedtime. "Looks like it's finally slowing down," Louisa said, nodding toward the dining area where only 3 tables remained occupied. "You want to start on the side work? I can handle the rest of these." Maya glanced at the wall clock. If she finished early enough, she might catch the 10:15 bus instead of waiting for the 11 hour. "Thanks," she said, grateful for the small kindness from her co-worker. She began refilling salt and pepper shakers at the empty tables, her movements efficient from years of practice. The diner's night manager, Victor, was counting cash at the register, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. The familiar sounds of the diner, clinking dishes, the sizzle of the grill, the gentle hum of conversations, had always been oddly comforting to Maya, a constant in her otherwise unpredictable life. At the corner booth, an older gentleman in an expensive-looking gray suit was preparing to leave. Maya had noticed him earlier. He wasn't a regular, and he stood out among Rosie's usual crowd with his tailored clothes and quiet demeanor. He'd ordered only coffee and a slice of apple pie, leaving most of the pie untouched while he worked on what appeared to be important documents. He'd barely looked up when she'd refilled his coffee twice. He gathered his papers now, sliding them into a sleek leather briefcase. Maya watched from the corner of her eye as he checked his watch, a gleaming timepiece that probably cost more than her monthly rent, before leaving a $20 bill on the table for a $9 check. With a brief nod to no one in particular, he buttoned his overcoat and stepped out into the rain. Maya approached his vacated table, grateful for the generous tip. As she cleared the barely touched pie and coffee mug, something caught her eye on the floor beneath the booth, a dark object partially hidden by the table leg. Bending down, she discovered a wallet, expensive black leather with subtle stitching along the edges. Her heart quickened as she picked it up. It was heavy and substantial in her hand. Looking toward the door, she caught a glimpse of the man's retreating figure, already disappearing into the rain. She considered calling after him, but he was too far away to hear over the storm. Maya brought the wallet to the counter, away from curious eyes. Opening it cautiously, she found no driver's license or identification in the usual slot, just several platinum and black credit cards, the kind Maya had only seen in advertisements. Behind the cards in a separate compartment was cash. A lot of cash. Her fingers trembled slightly as she counted. $1,200 in crisp $100 bills. The amount hit her like a physical force. $1,200 was her rent plus utilities. $1,200 was a new winter coat for Eli, plus his overdue dentist appointment. It was breathing room in a life where she'd been holding her breath for years. A small voice in the back of her mind whispered that no one would know if she kept it. The man clearly had money to spare. He hadn't even bothered putting identification in his wallet. People like that probably had accountants to cancel credit cards and assistants to replace lost cash. "What you got there?" Victor's voice startled her. Maya closed the wallet quickly, her cheeks warming. "Someone left this. The guy in the gray suit who just left." Victor leaned over the counter for a closer look. "Fancy. Any ID?" Maya shook her head. "Just credit cards and cash." "How much cash?" Victor raised an eyebrow. $1,200, Maya admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor let out a low whistle. "Well, lucky for Mr. Fancy Suit, he left it with you and not someone else." He said it matter-of-factly, as if Maya's honesty was a given, not a choice she was actively struggling with. "There's no ID, though," Maya said, turning the wallet over. "I don't know how to find him," Victor shrugged. Company policy says turn it in. We'll keep it in the safe for 2 weeks. If nobody claims it, it's yours. 2 weeks. Maya's mind raced through all the bills coming due much sooner than that. She flipped through the wallet again, looking for any clue to the owner's identity. Something slipped from one of the smaller pockets, a business card. She picked it up. Richard Harrington, Harrington Ventures, followed by an address in the upscale riverfront district downtown. Look, she showed Victor. I found his card. Victor glanced at it and let out another whistle. Richard Harrington? That guy's loaded. Owns half the tech companies in the city. No wonder he's carrying that much cash. He handed back the card. We can call that number tomorrow or drop the wallet at the police station on Elm Street. They'll get it back to him. Maya stared at the address on the card. The riverfront district was nearly 2 miles away, but if the owner was as wealthy as Victor suggested, he might notice the missing wallet tonight. She thought of all the times she'd lost something important. Her apartment key, her bus pass, Eli's permission slip, and the stress it had caused. I'm going to take it to him, she said suddenly, surprising herself. The address isn't too far. Victor looked at her like she'd suggested swimming across the ocean. Now in this weather? Are you crazy? It's pouring out there and you don't even have a car. I can take the bus part of the way, Maya said, though she knew the buses to that district would be running infrequently this late. He might need his credit cards tonight. Maya, come on. The guy's a billionaire. He's got other credit cards. Victor shook his head. Just leave it in the safe. I'll call the number in the morning. Louisa joined the conversation, having overheard from nearby. $1,200? Girl, I'd be tempted to consider that a tip, she joked, though her eyes were serious. You know how long it would take to earn that in tips around here? Maya did know. She knew exactly. 3 weeks of double shifts if she was lucky, but something deeper than calculation stirred within her. I'd want someone to return my wallet if I lost it, she said simply. Your wallet doesn't have $1,200 in it, Louisa pointed out. Maya thought of Eli, of the values she was trying to teach him about right and wrong. Even when life was unfair, what would she tell him if he asked what happened to a wallet someone had lost? Would she want him to hear that his mother had kept it even for a few days because they needed the money? I'm going to return it tonight, Maya repeated more firmly this time. Her decision made, she felt a surprising sense of peace, despite the practical voices in her head listing all the reasons this was foolish. Victor sighed, recognizing the determination in her voice. At least wait until your shift is officially over. And take my umbrella. It's bigger than yours. Maya nodded, grateful. She finished her side work with renewed energy, her mind occupied with planning the journey ahead. She studied the address on the business card, the Olympus building on Riverside Drive. She'd passed it before, a gleaming high-rise of steel and glass that seemed to touch the clouds, housing luxury apartments in its upper floors. As she counted her tips at the end of her shift, she set aside the $20 from Richard Harrington, refusing to spend it until she could return his wallet. It felt wrong somehow, like it would taint her decision. In the small employee bathroom, Maya freshened up as best she could, smoothing her hair and straightening her uniform. She wasn't sure why it mattered how she looked to deliver a wallet, but something about returning, something valuable to a wealthy person, made her conscious of her appearance in a way she usually wasn't. The rain had intensified, again by the time she clocked out at 10:30. Maya checked the bus schedule on her phone, her hopes sinking when she saw the alert. Route 67 to Riverside District, service suspended due to flooding. You can still leave it here, Victor reminded her, seeing her frown at the phone. Nobody would blame you. Maya looked out at the storm, then down at the expensive wallet in her hands. The practical choice was obvious, yet something inside her resisted. I'll be back in an hour or so, she said, borrowing Victor's large black umbrella. If Mrs. Wu calls about Eli, tell her I'll be there as soon as I can. She wrapped the wallet carefully in plastic from the kitchen to protect it from the rain, then tucked it securely in her inner jacket pocket. Drawing a deep breath, Maya stepped outside into the downpour. The force of the rain was shocking, even with the umbrella. Within moments, the bottom of her uniform pants were soaked from the ankle-deep puddles that had formed along the sidewalk. Cars drove slowly past, their headlights creating eerie glows in the watery darkness, occasionally sending waves of dirty water onto the sidewalk when they hit particularly deep puddles. Maya pulled her jacket tighter around herself. Victor's umbrella struggling against the wind. The 20-minute walk to the bus stop felt much longer in these conditions, and she knew that was just the beginning of her journey. As she walked, her mind kept returning to the wallet against her chest and the man who had left it behind, Richard Harrington. She wondered what kind of life he lived, whether he would even notice the missing $1,200, whether the loss of the wallet would register as anything more than a minor inconvenience in his world. A part of her still questioned her decision. Was this naive, foolish? Would he even appreciate the gesture? Or would he see her, a waitress in a soggy uniform, as an intrusion into his exclusive world? She didn't have answers to these questions. All she knew was that something beyond reason was driving her forward through the rain, one step at a time, toward an encounter that neither she nor Richard Harrington could possibly anticipate. The rain fell in sheets, transforming the familiar streets into rushing streams of water. Maya huddled under Victor's umbrella, but it offered little protection against the wind that whipped the rain sideways. Within 10 minutes, her shoes were completely soaked through, her socks squelching with each step. The bottom 6 inches of her uniform pants clung to her legs, cold and heavy. Maya checked her phone, the screen lighting up beneath the partial shelter of the umbrella. It was 10:45 p.m., and according to the map, she had another 1.5 miles to go. Under normal circumstances, this would be a 30-minute walk. In this weather, with flooded sidewalks and limited visibility, it could take twice as long. A car drove past too quickly, sending a wave of dirty water over her legs. Maya gasped at the shock of cold, then pressed her lips together, determined not to be deterred. The wallet pressed against her chest beneath her jacket, wrapped in its protective plastic. The thought of that small package and what it represented pushed her forward. Lightning flashed overhead, briefly illuminating the deserted street. The boom of thunder followed almost immediately, so loud that Maya felt it in her chest. The storm was directly overhead now. She quickened her pace as much as the treacherous footing would allow. The neighborhoods changed as Maya moved toward downtown. The familiar shops and modest apartment buildings of her area gave way to upscale boutiques and sleek office buildings, all dark and shuttered at this hour. The streets here were better lit, but the sidewalks were just as flooded, and there wasn't another pedestrian in sight. Everyone with any sense was indoors on a night like this. A passing police car slowed, the officer inside eyeing her curiously. For a moment, Maya thought he might stop and offer her a ride, but after a brief hesitation, the car continued on its way. She wasn't surprised. In her experience, police officers rarely stopped to help people who looked like her, especially in this part of town. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Wu. "Eli woke up asking for you," told him Mama working late. "He's sleeping again now. Be careful in storm." Maya felt the familiar pang of maternal guilt. How many times had her son woken to find her absent? How many bedtime stories had been read by someone else? She knew Mrs. Wu took wonderful care of him, but it wasn't the same as having his mother there. Almost done, she texted back one-handed, trying to keep the phone dry. "Thank you. See you soon." The riverfront district loomed ahead, a collection of modern high-rises that housed the city's wealthiest residents and most prestigious businesses. In daylight, these buildings sparkled with glass and steel, reflecting the sun and sky. Tonight, they were imposing shadows against the stormy darkness, their heights disappearing into low-hanging clouds, windows glowing like scattered stars. Maya paused at a street corner, checking the address on the business card again. The Olympus building should be just ahead, on the right side of Riverside Drive. Her legs ached from pushing through ankle-deep water, and her hands were stiff with cold despite the relative warmth of the September night. The rain had soaked through in places where the umbrella couldn't protect her, leaving her shivering slightly. For the 100th time since leaving the diner, Maya questioned her decision. Who walks nearly 2 miles in a thunderstorm to return a wallet? Why hadn't she just left it at the diner as Victor suggested? The owner would have gotten it eventually. But each time these thoughts surfaced, she pushed them away. She'd made her choice, and she would see it through. The Olympus building appeared before her, taller and more impressive than she had imagined. 50 floors at least, its glass exterior stretching toward the sky like a monument to wealth and power. A circular driveway led to the main entrance where warm light spilled onto the rain-slicked pavement. Maya approached slowly, suddenly conscious of her appearance. Her uniform was soaked and splattered with mud, Her hair, despite her best efforts to keep it under the umbrella, was damp and beginning to curl wildly around her face. Her work shoes, comfortable for long shifts on her feet but never meant for wading through flooded streets, were stained and sodden. At the entrance, a doorman stood beneath the shelter of a large awning. He was an older man with silver hair and a crisp maroon uniform adorned with gold buttons. His expression shifted from boredom to surprise as Maya approached, dripping onto the polished stone of the entryway. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone suggesting that he doubted he could or should. Maya straightened her shoulders. "I'm here to see Mr. Richard Harrington. He left his wallet at Rosie's diner earlier this evening." The doorman's eyebrows rose slightly. "Mr. Harrington? At a diner?" His eyes moved over Maya's waitress uniform, understanding dawning. "I see. Well, Mr. Harrington isn't receiving visitors at this hour." "I'm not a visitor," Maya explained, trying to keep the exhaustion from her voice. "I'm just returning his property. He had credit cards and cash in there. I thought he'd want it back right away." The doorman seemed to consider this, his gaze moving from Maya to the storm outside and back again. "You walked here in this?" There was a note of disbelief in his voice. Maya nodded, too tired to explain further. The doorman's expression softened slightly. "You could have just called. We have a lost and found service for residents. The buses stopped running because of flooding," Maya said, "and I didn't think about calling. I just—" She trailed off, realizing how impulsive her decision must seem to others. "I wanted to make sure he got it back tonight." The doorman studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "Wait here," he finally said, gesturing to a small seating area in the lobby. "I'll call up to the penthouse." Maya's eyes widened. "Penthouse?" The doorman almost smiled. "Yes, Mr. Harrington occupies the penthouse floor." He pointed to a house phone mounted on the wall near the elevator bank. "Please have a seat. Try not to drip on the Italian marble." Maya stood awkwardly on the mat by the door, unwilling to spread the puddle forming at her feet onto the pristine white marble floor of the lobby. The space was larger than her entire apartment, with soaring ceilings, modern art installations, and sleek furniture that looked more decorative than functional. A massive chandelier hung overhead, casting a warm glow over everything. From her position, Maya could see several security cameras mounted discreetly in the corners of the lobby. One was pointed directly at her, its small red light blinking steadily. She wondered what the person watching the footage thought of, her a bedraggled waitress dripping rainwater onto the entrance mat of one of the city's most exclusive addresses. The doorman spoke quietly into the house phone, occasionally glancing in Maya's direction. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but his expression suggested surprise at whatever response he was receiving. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only a minute or two, he returned to where Maya stood. "Mr. Harrington says to send you up." He sounded as surprised by this as Maya felt. "Elevator on the right. Penthouse floor. You'll need this." He handed her a small key card. "For the elevator. It won't go to the penthouse without it." Maya took the card with damp fingers. "Thank you." "Gregory," the doorman supplied. "Been working this door for 22 years. He looked at her with newfound curiosity. "Most people would have kept the wallet, you know, or at least waited until tomorrow." Maya didn't know how to respond to that. Instead, she simply nodded and made her way to the elevator, leaving small wet footprints on the immaculate floor despite her best efforts. The elevator was lined with mirrors and more marble, making Maya acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. Her reflection stared back at her from all sides. Hair frizzed from the rain, mascara slightly smudged beneath her eyes, uniform rumpled and stained. She looked exactly like what she was, a waitress who had walked through a thunderstorm, far from home and far from her comfort zone. She inserted the key card into a slot beneath the panel of buttons and watched as a previously unlit button labeled PH illuminated. The elevator began to rise swiftly and silently, floor numbers flashing by on a digital display. As it climbed higher and higher, Maya's stomach tightened with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. What would Richard Harrington be like? Would he appreciate what she'd done? Or would he see her as an interruption to his evening? Would he even understand what it had cost her to come here? Not just the physical discomfort, but the time away from her son, the risk of missing the last bus home, the courage it took to step into this world so different from her own, and deeper still, why had she really come? Was it purely about doing the right thing, or was there something else? Some hope or curiosity about the life behind these walls of wealth and privilege. The elevator slowed as it approached the top floor, floor number 50 appearing on the display. With a soft chime, the doors slid open, revealing a short hallway with a single set of double doors at the end. Maya stepped out cautiously, her wet shoes squeaking slightly on the hardwood floor. Before she could approach the doors or look for a bell, one of the doors swung open, revealing a tall figure silhouetted against the warm light from within. "You must be the waitress from Rosie's Diner," a deep voice said. "Please come in out of those wet clothes. We have a lot to talk about." Taking a deep breath, Maya stepped forward into a moment that would change the course of her life forever. Though she couldn't possibly know it yet, Richard Harrington wasn't what Maya had expected. In her mind, billionaires were either very old men with stern faces or young tech geniuses in hoodies and sneakers. Richard was neither. He appeared to be in his early 60s, with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. He wore a simple black sweater and slacks, casual but clearly expensive. "Please come in," he said, stepping aside to allow Maya to enter. His voice carried a slight accent she couldn't place, perhaps New England or somewhere on the East Coast. Maya hesitated at the threshold, suddenly aware of how much water she was dripping onto the polished floor. "I don't want to ruin anything," she said, gesturing to her soaked clothing. Richard waved away her concern. "It's just water. Floors can be cleaned." He pointed to a small tiled area just inside the door. "You can leave your shoes there if you'd like." Maya gratefully slipped off her squelching shoes and placed them beside the door. Her socks were soaked through as well, but removing those seemed too informal for the situation. The penthouse opened before her, and Maya tried not to gape. The space was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city lights and the storm beyond. Despite its size, the apartment felt surprisingly warm and lived in. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled to capacity. A large fireplace crackled in the center of the main room, surrounded by comfortable-looking furniture in deep blues and rich browns. "You must be freezing," Richard said, disappearing briefly into another room. He returned with a large towel and what appeared to be a fluffy bathrobe. "The bathroom is just down that hallway if you'd like to dry off. I can put your uniform in the dryer." Maya clutched the plastic-wrapped wallet in her hand, remembering why she'd come. "Oh, that's not necessary. I just wanted to return this." She held out the wallet. "You left it at the diner earlier tonight." Richard looked at the wallet, then back at Maya, his expression unreadable. "You walked all the way here in this storm to return my wallet?" Maya nodded, feeling slightly foolish under his gaze. "The buses stopped running because of flooding. I thought you might need your credit cards tonight." "And the cash?" he asked quietly. "Did you look inside?" Maya felt her cheeks warm. "Yes, there was $1,200. "And your business card with this address?" Richard studied her for a long moment, and Maya fought the urge to look away. Finally, he smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his serious face. "I've lived in this city for 30 years, he said, "and I'm still surprised by people. Please at least dry off before you leave. I'll make some tea." Before Maya could protest, he had disappeared into what she assumed was the kitchen. Left alone, Maya took the opportunity to look around more closely. Unlike the sterile lobby downstairs, this space felt like a real home. Photos lined the mantelpiece, Richard with various people in different locations around the world. A half-finished chess game sat on a small table near the window. Books and magazines were stacked on nearly every surface, many with bookmarks protruding from their pages. Feeling increasingly uncomfortable in her wet clothes, Maya decided to take Richard up on his offer to use the bathroom. Following his directions, she found a space larger than her entire kitchen with heated floors and soft lighting. She quickly dried her hair and face with the fluffy towel, then hesitated over the bathrobe. It seemed too familiar, but her uniform was clinging uncomfortably to her skin. After a moment's deliberation, she slipped off her wet uniform top and dried herself, keeping on her undershirt, which was mostly dry. She wrapped the robe around herself over her uniform pants, which were wet only at the bottom. The robe was ridiculously large on her small frame, but its warmth was immediate and welcome. When she emerged, Richard was placing a tray on the coffee table. Steam rose from a delicate teapot, and a plate of cookies sat beside it. "I'm afraid I don't cook much," he explained, "but my housekeeper keeps me well supplied with tea and baked goods. Please sit." Maya perched on the edge of one of the armchairs, the wallet still clutched in her hand. Richard sat across from her, pouring tea into two china cups that looked too fragile to actually use. "Milk? Sugar?" he asked. "Just sugar, please," Maya answered, finally setting the wallet on the table between them. "I really can't stay long. I need to catch the last bus home." Richard nodded, stirring a small spoonful of sugar into her tea before passing it to her. "Where is home?" "Pine Hills," Maya answered. "Near the community college. That's quite a distance." "You walked all that way?" Maya nodded, wrapping her cold fingers around the warm teacup. "It wasn't so bad before the rain got worse." Richard leaned back in his chair, studying her with curious eyes. Most people would have kept the wallet, or at least the cash, or they would have left it with the diner manager. "Why didn't you?" The question caught Maya off guard. She'd been asking herself the same thing since she'd left Rosie's and still wasn't sure of the answer. "I thought about it," she admitted. $1,200 would solve a lot of problems right now. She took a sip of tea, gathering her thoughts. "But I kept thinking about how I'd feel if it were my wallet, with my money that I needed for something important. And I thought about what I'd want my son to do in the same situation." "You have a son?" Maya nodded. "Eli, he's 7. And his father?" "Not in the picture," Maya said simply. Richard nodded, not pressing further. "So you're raising him alone, working as a waitress at Rosie's diner?" "Double shifts most days," Maya said. "And I'm taking business classes at the community college. I want to open my own cafe someday." Something flickered in Richard's eyes. Interest, perhaps, or recognition. "Business classes? Tell me about that." Maybe it was the warmth of the tea or the comfort of the robe, or simply the strange unreality of sitting in a billionaire's penthouse after walking through a storm. But Maya found herself opening up. She told Richard about her dream of a small neighborhood cafe that would serve good, affordable food in a welcoming space. She described her struggles to balance work, school, and parenting, and the small victories that kept her going. Eli's reading achievements, her good grades despite her exhaustion, the regular customers who brightened her days at the diner. Richard listened intently, asking occasional questions but mostly letting her speak. When she finally fell silent, embarrassed by how much she'd shared with a stranger, he smiled again. "Do you know why I was at Rosie's diner tonight?" he asked. Maya shook her head. "I grew up 4 blocks from there," Richard said, surprising her. "My father drove a city bus and my mother cleaned houses for wealthy families. Every Sunday after church, they would take me to Rosie's for pancakes. It was our one luxury." Maya tried to reconcile this information with the man sitting before her, in his multi-million-dollar penthouse with its panoramic views. "I go back sometimes," Richard continued, "when I need to remember where I came from. When things in my world get too detached from reality." A comfortable silence fell between them. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the city spread below. The rain continued to pour, but inside, Maya felt warmer and safer than she had in a long time. "You remind me of my mother," Richard said finally. "She had that same determination. That same integrity, I suppose you'd call it. It's rare, especially in my world." Maya wasn't sure how to respond to that. "I should probably go," she said, glancing at the clock on the mantel. "The last bus—" "Let me call you a car service," Richard said, reaching for his phone. "It's the least I can do." "That's not necessary," Maya began, but Richard held up a hand. "Please. Allow me this small gesture of thanks." As he made the call, arranging for a car to take Maya home, she found herself studying him just as he had studied her earlier. There was something familiar about him despite their vastly different lives, a kind of quiet dignity that reminded her of her grandmother, who had raised her after her parents died. When he ended the call, Richard turned back to Maya. "The car will be here in 10 minutes, and I've asked my assistant to have your uniform cleaned and returned to you tomorrow." "Oh, I can take it with me," Maya protested, but Richard shook his head. "It's no trouble. Besides, it gives me an excuse to continue our conversation another time." Maya hesitated, unsure what to make of this statement. Richard seemed to sense her confusion. "I have a proposal for you," he said, leaning forward slightly. "A business proposal. But it's too late to discuss it properly tonight. Would you be willing to meet me tomorrow? Say at noon? I can come to Rosie's or anywhere you prefer." Maya's mind raced. A business proposal? From a billionaire? It seemed too strange to be real. I have class until 2 tomorrow, she said cautiously. 2:30 then. At the coffee shop across from your college? The one with the blue awning? Maya nodded slowly. Bluebird Cafe, I know it. Perfect. Richard smiled, and this time Maya smiled back. A tentative connection forming between two people from worlds that rarely intersected. The doorman called up to announce that the car had arrived. As Maya prepared to leave, changing back into her still damp uniform top but keeping her pants under the bathrobe which Richard insisted she borrow, he handed her an envelope. For your trouble, he said when she looked at him questioningly. I don't need a reward, Maya said firmly, holding out the wallet. I just wanted to return what was yours. Richard took the wallet, then gently pressed the envelope into her hand. It's not a reward. Consider it compensation for your time and the bus fare you would have spent anyway. Please. The envelope felt light in Maya's hand. She slipped it into her pocket without opening it, not wanting to seem ungrateful by refusing again. At the door, Richard paused. Thank you, Maya, not just for the wallet, but for reminding me that there are still good people in this world. I'll see you tomorrow. As the elevator doors closed, taking Maya back down to the lobby where a sleek black car waited to drive her home, she had no idea that this chance encounter had already set in motion events that would transform her life. 3 months had passed since that rainy night, when Maya had trudged through flooded streets to return a wallet to a stranger. 3 months that had transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined. Maya stood in the center of Neighborhood Bistro, the morning sunlight streaming through the large windows illuminating the space she now managed. The cafe wasn't officially open yet, but the smell of fresh bread already filled the air as the baker, Louisa, the same Louisa who had once been her fellow waitress at Rosie's, worked her magic in the kitchen. Maya ran her hand along the smooth wooden counter, still amazed that this place existed, that it was partly hers. The bistro occupied a previously vacant storefront just 3 blocks from Maya's apartment building. Its walls were painted a warm yellow, the tables and chairs a mix of vintage finds that Maya had personally restored. Local artwork hung on the walls, each piece created by someone from the neighborhood, each telling its own story. The meeting at Bluebird Cafe 3 months ago had been the beginning. Richard had arrived precisely at 2:30, dressed in a casual sweater and slacks that somehow still looked expensive. He'd bought them both coffee, and then laid out a proposal that had left Maya speechless. I want to invest in your cafe, he had said simply, not as charity but as a business venture. I believe in your vision and I believe in you. Maya had been skeptical at first, certain there must be a catch. Why would you invest in someone you barely know? Someone with no experience running a business? Richard had smiled that same warm smile from the night before. I've built my career on recognizing potential. In technologies, in markets, and in people. You have the drive, the vision, and most importantly, the character to succeed. The rest can be learned. The proposal had been more generous than anything Maya could have dreamed. Richard would provide capital for the cafe, fund Maya's remaining business courses, and connect her with mentors in the restaurant industry. In return, he would hold a minority stake in the business with Maya as the majority owner and manager. You'll make the decisions, he had insisted. I'm just providing the resources for you to succeed. Consider it seed funding for your dream. That conversation had set everything in motion. With Richard's connections, the vacant storefront had been secured within a week. Permits that normally took months were expedited. Maya had been introduced to suppliers, contractors, and industry veterans who shared their knowledge generously. But the most surprising development had come 2 weeks after the rainy night, when Richard had called Maya to his office downtown. There's something I want you to see, he had said, gesturing to his computer screen. The video showed Maya walking through the storm, head bent against the rain, making her determined way toward the Olympus building. It had been captured by the building's security cameras and several traffic cams along her route. Gregory sent this footage to building security as a matter of routine, Richard explained. I happened to see it when they were reviewing the night's footage. With your permission, I'd like to share it. Maya had watched her own journey with strange detachment. From the outside, it looked even more dramatic. A small figure pushing through nearly knee-deep water at points, stumbling occasionally but always continuing forward. Why would you want to share this? She had asked. Because it tells a story about character, about doing the right thing even when it's difficult. And because I'd like to attach it to something bigger. That something bigger had turned into the Rainy Night Scholarship Fund, established with an initial $1 million donation from Richard's foundation. The fund provided educational grants specifically for working parents pursuing degrees while supporting their families. The first round of scholarships had been awarded just last month, with Maya sitting proudly on the selection committee. The video had indeed gone viral, though Maya had initially been embarrassed by the attention. News outlets had picked up the story. Waitress walks through storm to return billionaire's wallet. And for a few uncomfortable weeks, Maya had found herself being recognized on the street, at Eli's school, even at her college classes. But the attention had faded, as it always does. What remained was the scholarship fund, the cafe, and the life-changing opportunities that had grown from one decision on a rainy night. The bell above the door jingled, pulling Maya from her memories. Mrs. Wu entered, leading a group of excited children from her building. "We come for breakfast before school," Mrs. Wu announced. "These little ones want to see where Miss Maya works now." Maya smiled, bending down to greet the children. "We're not officially open for another 20 minutes, but I think we can make an exception for special guests." The children swarmed around the pastry case, pointing excitedly at the muffins and cookies on display. Eli, who had been helping to fold napkins at one of the tables, rushed over to join his friends. "Mom, can they try the new hot chocolate?" he asked. At Maya's nod, he proudly led his friends to a table, suddenly the expert host. Maya watched her son with a swelling heart. The changes in their lives had affected him too in all the best ways. They'd moved to a 2-bedroom apartment in the same building, giving Eli his own room for the first time. His school attendance was perfect now that Maya's schedule allowed her to both drop him off and pick him up each day. His reading, already advanced, had flourished with the children's book club Maya had started at the cafe on Saturday mornings. As she prepared hot chocolate for the children, Maya glanced at the framed newspaper article hanging beside the register. It featured a photo of her and Richard at the grand opening of Neighborhood Bistro 2 months ago, cutting a ribbon while surrounded by community members. The headline read, "Local waitress and billionaire partner to revitalize community." The article told their story, but Maya knew there were parts no reporter could capture. The late nights she'd spent poring over business plans with Richard's mentors, the tears of frustration when permits were delayed, the moment she'd realized she needed to hire her first employee, and the terror that had accompanied that responsibility. Through it all, Richard had been not just a financial backer, but a true partner. He stopped by the cafe at least once a week, sometimes to discuss business, but often just to enjoy a cup of coffee and watch the space fill with neighborhood residents who had quickly claimed it as their own. "You've created something special here," he had told her just yesterday, looking around at the diverse crowd that filled the tables. "This is exactly what this community needed." Maya had smiled, knowing he was right. The bistro had quickly become more than just a place to eat. It was a gathering spot, a community hub where neighbors connected over affordable good food. Local groups held meetings in the back room. Job seekers used the free Wi-Fi to submit applications. Eli's classmates came after school for homework help, and Mrs. Wu's famous cookies, which she now supplied to the cafe daily. The door jingled again, and Maya looked up to see Richard entering, right on time for their weekly meeting. He waved to Eli and the other children before making his way to the counter. "Good morning," he greeted Maya. "Ready to go over the numbers from last month?" Maya nodded, gesturing to the office in the back. As they walked through the cafe, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she'd come. Her life had changed dramatically, yes. The financial struggles that had once defined her daily existence were largely gone. The crushing exhaustion of double shifts and night classes had been replaced by a different kind of tiredness, the satisfying fatigue of building something meaningful. But Maya knew that the most significant transformation wasn't in her circumstances. It was in her confidence, in her sense of possibility. She had always been determined, always been hardworking, but now she also believed in herself as a business owner, as a leader in her community, as someone who could create change. And she hoped that was the real lesson Eli would take from all of this. Not that one lucky encounter could change your life, but that character mattered. That doing the right thing, even when it was difficult, even when easier options presented themselves, was its own kind of wealth. In the office, Maya pulled out the folder containing last month's financial reports. The numbers were good, better than projected. The bistro wasn't just surviving. It was thriving. "I've been thinking," she said to Richard as they sat down, "about expanding the scholarship program to include a mentorship component. Connecting recipients with business leaders like yourself, the way you've mentored me." Richard smiled, that now familiar warmth reaching his eyes. "I think that's an excellent idea. Tell me more." As Maya outlined her vision, she glanced through the office window at Eli, happily sipping hot chocolate with his friends. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the opportunities that had come her way, but for the stormy night that had tested her character and found it strong. Some might call it luck or fate that Richard's wallet had ended up at her table that night. But Maya knew better. It wasn't luck that had sent her out into the storm. It wasn't fate that had guided her steps through flooded streets. It was choice. Her choice to do what was right regardless of the cost. And in the end, that choice had revealed not just who she was, but who she could become.